Welcome back to the Peer Purpose Podcast. Such a delight to be here with you. I hope you enjoyed the episode 2 weeks ago with Katie Ray, and Sean Swiger was before that. So very, very delighted to be here with you. We're rolling out a little bit of a new segment tonight. We call it the No Child Left Behind segment. And I actually got a very special guest in the building. I've gotten to know this guy very well over the last 2 years. His name is Christopher Dresang. He is actually the director of the Student Support Services for Natrona County School District in Casper, Wyoming. Gotten to know him really well. He's an awesome guy. Literally, the district is blessed to have him, and we have him in the building today. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, and thank you for all the praise. I love it.
Absolutely. I remember a couple years ago. So just to give people a little bit of context, I've done 2 assemblies for you and a staff development.
Yes.
And I'll never forget when I was getting ready to do the staff development and you actually gave me a crazy intro.
Oh yeah.
I think that was for the staff development. I'm not sure if it was that for the assembly. And you were so animated. And I couldn't do that for you tonight.
That's okay.
But I just remember that. And so even from that time, from the first time we met, we've hit it off. And I love what you're doing for education. I love what you're doing for the city of Casper, for Natrona County School District.
Thank you.
They're blessed to have you. Let's get into it a little bit. Give me a little bit of your background. How did you get here? Backstories are important.
You bet. Yeah. So I graduated from Natrona County High School and did not know what I wanted to be. And so one day I said, well, I'm going to be a police officer. My brother-in-law is a police officer. I think very highly of police officers, love working with Casper Police Department. And at the time, I did not have that relationship. Not that it was a bad relationship. Sure. I just didn't know them. Anyway, and I said, I want to go into criminal justice. And then I was in a class where we had to do a triangulation where you look at evidence and then pinpoint it against walls and things that don't move. And the people I were working with were just odd. And I remember reflecting, going, I have to work with these people for my career. This is all I'm going to ever do. And I went, no, I can't do this.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I said, well, what am I good at? And I said, well, I really love reading and I like writing. So I'll go into English. And so I got a 2-year degree from Casper College, went to University of Wyoming. And I got my 4-year degree there, then taught there as an adjunct for a little bit. And then naively thought I could just get into education. I was like, I'm just going to go teach public education. You need a degree, you need certifications. Right. So they had this program back in the day through Montana, where if you enrolled in their program, you could teach simultaneously. You didn't have to student teach. So I've never student taught ever. And I was able to get a job at Natrona County High School, completed that. So I got 2 dual graduate degrees, taught for 5 years, became a principal at Fort Casper Academy, loved the school. It was very structured, which was hard for me because I'm not a very structured guy, despite all the different things I do. And so I left there only after a year, which was hard. And I went to go work with one of the people that I highly respect, Ron Estes. He was an assistant principal at Dean Morgan and an assistant principal at NC. And I went back to work with him. It was very tumultuous. We had a principal get essentially moved, and then we were without a principal for a year. So it was just assistant principals running things. And I was there for 8 years. And then moved over to the role I'm in now, where I'm the director of student support. And I work every day with at-risk kids, dropouts, homeschool, kids that need someone to listen and then help them with the next step because there's some hurdle in their way.
Right. Wow. That's interesting, man. I didn't know you were going into criminal justice at first.
Yeah.
That's really, it's crazy how we start out, right? And we think, like for me, it was football. I thought that was going to be the path. Clearly that didn't work. But we start out in something and it completely leads to something else that actually changes our life for the better.
Yes.
And so it's interesting to hear that story and you say, yeah, I was actually going to do criminal justice, but people seemed a little off to me. So let me jump into education. And, I think education is actually something you have to jump into blindly.
Oh, agreed.
Because you're not going to go, I don't think you're going to go into that thing knowing what you know now.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. And it's hard for me. I have this little theory where if you enjoy what you do, people look at you and they say, well, I want to do that.
Right.
And administration work is super hard. But the people that I surround myself with and the joy that I find in what I do They look at me and they go, I want that job.
Right.
And they don't want that.
Right.
So it's hard. It's hard at times to go, just relax and have fun and do what you want to do. Don't do what you see me doing, because I have to shelve a lot of that. And I think when you say go into it blindly, nowadays I have to remind myself not to look at the things that are wrong in education.
Yeah.
And I have to say, no, you have to do it. I always default to the kids.
Yeah.
You got to love kids. If you're not comfortable saying you love kids, then you shouldn't do it, because that's what it's about. It's not about anything else but being there for a kid, and really being able to do whatever for them. And the best example I have is years ago, I was working with this teacher who was very difficult to work with. His colleagues didn't like him. He was hard for me to work with because he was so negative all the time. And I just thought to myself, get out, retire, be done. You're just bringing people down.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a kid one day and I said, oh yeah, who's your teacher? And they mentioned his name. And I went, oh my gosh. And it was an epiphany. Just because I didn't like him doesn't mean the kids didn't like him.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I got to reframe how I think about that. And he's since retired, and it was good for him to get out. But I was like, gosh, he did help some kids. And that's what it's about. One kid, doesn't matter. That's the bar.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's the interesting thing about education is there's so many different types of people, right? And obviously there are people, I work in schools, and there's people, I've been all over the place, and there's people that you can tell they don't, it's clearly some people wanted the summers and
for the paycheck,
the paycheck. And that is actually something that you can't do in education anymore. A couple of years ago, I would go into these staff supports to staff developments, and I would tell teachers in the most loving way, if you're here for that paycheck, it's probably time to go.
Agreed. Yep.
And it's interesting, the generation that we're in now is way different than, the navigation is crazy.
Yeah.
How having to navigate the type of kids we have, the type of parents that we deal with, right?
Yep.
And so being in that situation, you have to be in a place where you, like you said, you love kids.
Absolutely.
It has to be that. Otherwise, you're never, it's not going to work for you. And so the question I have for you with this is, how have you changed your approach generationally as the generations have continued to come at one after another?
That's a good question, because right now we have lots of different generations raising lots of different generations.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things I see is you have grandfathers and grandmothers raising 2 generations off, like their great grandchildren.
Yes.
And I can't tell you the number of stories where I'm trying to, talk to, an older generation and say, well, it's not about, you're not teaching, I'll give you a good example. You're not teaching ethics. You're not teaching grit. You're not teaching some of the things that I grew up with you fall down and you cut your knee and your dad and mom throw some dirt on it and get up and keep going. You're dealing with a generation that, or I'm dealing with a generation that they ignore it and say, I don't have time for that. Or you can handle that on your own. And so then these kids develop coping mechanisms or avoidance, and they don't want to do anything. And so when I talk to a grandparent and say, oh, I just need your kid to not disagree with the teacher and flip a chair. That's all I need.
Right.
What's the problem? Well, the kid can't read. Okay, so teach them some grit. We got to work on reading. Well, they don't know how to do that. And then when we try, there's a whole nother generation out there that says, well, it's not your job to teach these kids that. You teach them academics. Meanwhile, at home, they're not getting the emotional learning that they need to be successful.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's my biggest adjust has just been to remember that I'm dealing with multi-generational families. Many of them don't have the skills and ability to really fix the kid or like intervene with the kid in a way that's going to be positive. They only know lots of carrot, lots of stick. And there's no happy medium. So it's a lot of coaching. And like when my partnerships with Mercer House here in town, that's what we're doing is if a family's struggling with discipline, can they go to Mercer House and learn how to be better parents? Can they learn love and logic and how to raise kids in a traditional sense that is different from nowadays?
One of the things that I see a lot of is it's almost people are missing the point, right? In general, like just people, and what I mean by missing the point is they're not looking at the real problem, right? They're saying, well, why can't they just push through?
Yeah.
This young generation can't.
No, they cannot.
They cannot push through. There is a block there. They struggle. And it's actually crazy, some of the stuff that I see. And it's like, I look at some of that, I'm like, gosh, you know, that to them it's hard, but some of it's really not that hard.
No.
You know what I mean? And so, and one of the things I've said for a while now, and I tell schools this all the time, is like, we didn't make the mess. But at some point, how long are we going to walk past the milk on the floor before someone says in our own house, let's clean it up?
Right.
And so do you feel now we're in a position in public education that we have to teach healthy living skills as much as we're teaching academics? Because I believe we do. That you know what I do for a living, and I've created a program that changes the way public schools approach mental and emotional health by giving people healthy living skills, kids, and getting the root issues. That's the only way things go away, is if you get to the actual root. Do you feel we're here?
I do. I feel that we have, I mean, a lot of my job is spent working with families and kids and helping support administrators deal with 10% of our population. And that other 90, well, it isn't 90. It's more like the other 60% have it figured out. They're fine. They're going to make it work because they've got parents that are stable income. Yep. Everything's great. And they're learning that emotional learning at home.
Yes.
Then you've got 20% sitting on a fence.
Yep.
And they're kind of like watching and don't know what to do, and they're willing to follow. Then you've got 10%, another 10%. You will never, no matter what you do, it's kind of a Ruby Payne approach in the idea that this system was never designed for them, and they're gonna struggle. And so that's a hard group to figure out, because you have to leave our cookie cutter public education mindset to help them. And then you've got the 10% I work with, and they're the ones that really need something more because they're not getting it at home. You've got single parent households who are working 2 or 3 jobs, who might be homeless, who are dealing with their own divorces, job losses, trying to figure out their own lives. They're not teaching their kids. And so I feel it does fall on educators, especially schools more so than any specific subject, to set aside time and say, this is how you grow as a human being. One of the best things I've ever worked with is, like, for example, like and then Cowboy Ethics through Boys and Girls Club, like teaching kids. And I always go to grit, because that's one thing I think that they lack a lot, is how do you just overcome that feeling of adversity? Like, how do you
resiliency?
How do you build that? And I don't think, and we have to teach that. And we don't do a good job right now of that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I'm seeing too. I ask a question in all my surveys every 3rd month. And I've been doing this. One of my schools is 2.5 years that I've been within Colorado. Another school is 2 years. And from the very beginning, we ask a question: are you proud of your choices? That is one category that has not changed.
Yeah.
It has not changed. Every other category is through the roof. I mean, we're over 70% in almost every single other category.
Very cool.
And so it's really cool that kids are learning things. But it's their choices that they don't understand, that they're the ones that are responsible for them.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to keep pushing. And I believe that, and I can say this because I work in education a lot as well as you do. I do believe we're in a position where schools have to now start taking care of the emotional and mental needs of their kids. Because what happens, here's the question I want to ask them. Let's go here. What happens if we don't?
Agreed. Well, it's going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
I mean, my opinion is my own. I don't represent the school district tonight, but I'll tell you, you can just see it in the community. And I'll give you the most classic example, the mall. I mean, growing up, I hung out at the mall. I walked around with my friends at the mall. You learned like cues at the mall, what to say, what to do, how to act. Gone. That doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
So working with a group of kids who have friends who make poor choices, because I was there too. You're not immune to it. You just make a friend and you're like, oh, wow, I should not hang out with you, but you don't know that right away. And as time goes on, you figure that out. And now we don't get them all for that. You figure that out at school.
Yeah.
And school has consequences and hefty consequences.
Right.
So when you get that kid that's disconnected, that doesn't have supervision at home, who's struggling with their own choices in life and making poor choice after poor choice after poor choice, then it impacts you. And either you can get away from it or you can't. And if that's your only friend, you start making poor choices too.
That's it. I mean, you're gonna start acting like the people you hang out with.
Yep.
And here's the thing. One of the things that I've learned over time is these kids are just looking for belonging.
Yeah.
They're looking for a place to connect. And so when they see something, they run towards it full steam ahead, because it's the question that they get answered is, finally someone understands me.
Yeah. Yep.
And then that's where they and so they're going to stay there for so long because someone understands them, but they don't understand how that's actually crumbling them around them. And when we were talking tonight, it's just going to be, it's general education, right? All over the world. It's a general education. Natrona County is great. I've met great people over there. I love Casper, and I do believe there's a lot of amazing things happening within the school district here. But yeah, I'm talking general education, because it's a simple fact that everyone's in a place right now. And I'm hearing it all over the place. And I really think this is kind of some places they don't know what to do.
Agreed. And what's beautiful about Casper is we have the resources to make a change, whether it's partnering, when I said Mercer House, whether it's partnering Boys and Girls Club, whether it's finding people who've just graduated with their mental health social work degrees. And we're like, let's put you in place. Let's connect with the Wyoming Behavioral Institute. Let's connect with Central Wyoming Counseling and build a program.
Yeah.
You look at smaller communities, Glen Rock, Lusk, areas that don't have that, they're scrambling. And right now, all these new grants are coming out for mental health.
Yeah.
And it's like, great money, but who do you get for
Who's
that?
on the other end of that?
Yeah. And because you can get telehealth.
Absolutely.
But what's that going to do for, you're going to put a little kid in front of a screen? They're not going to grow. And so we need people like you. We need people who understand that there's much more to education than just a rote core curriculum. You need to reach the kid internally. And it's going to be hard. Casper, we'll figure it out. We've got the resources. It's smaller, and it's an epidemic across the nation where you don't have that.
110%. It's one of those situations where I'm going to say it. A lot of schools need the peer purpose mentorship program, because it's one of those situations where you actually step into a kid's world, and that's where we have to kind of get more to that place. And I feel for teachers out there because. And educators in general, because there is so much going on. And you got to think, every parent that might be listening to this is your kid. But how many other parents are dealing with something that are trying to get something done? So think about it. If we did something all day long as teachers, counselors, principals, we'd never get anything done. And now 95%, I think, of what a principal or superintendent deals with their day, it's all behavioral.
Oh, I'd imagine.
And I'm out there and I'm seeing this, and it's like their day is flooded with things. And again, so if that's one kid, can you imagine how many other situations that we have to jump into each and every day?
Yes.
And so it's really crazy how, what do we do? One of the things that I am working on is I'm really wanting to create something for teachers as well, where they can get a break and they can get to a place where they can take care of their emotional and mental well-being.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because it's one of those situations where they're only going to be as good as what they're doing. And, a lot of them are overwhelmed. Everywhere I go, teachers are just overwhelmed, and they have to get the education time in. The government's ruined that. We have to get the education time in because of testing and all the above. And so I see that we can neglect things because we have to get it done. And so I do believe that there's a reprieve coming. And I've said this for a long time. I was telling schools this in 2016. I said, I'm telling you, this is what's coming. These kids are getting harder. It's getting harder and harder for them to actually get through the day.
Yeah.
So academics are already, let's just push that off the table, because they're not doing that.
Yeah.
Half the time they're just trying to figure out how to regulate themselves. But I started telling schools, and people thought I was crazy. I said, in 20 years, there won't be schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just 2 years ago, I think we've seen one of the biggest mass exodus when it comes to teachers that we've ever seen.
And I think if you look at the University of Wyoming, we've been looking at statistics of even teachers entering the field way down. Yeah. When you talk to UW and kind of trying to figure out, well, what's the next generation of teaching going to look like? It's not there. And so then you have larger states like Florida is a great kind of petri dish to kind of look at, where now they have crazy credentialing. Like if they'll just get Joe Schmo off the street to come in and teach a kid. And as any teacher, educator will know, anybody, we've all gone through education, right? You can have a good teacher and a bad teacher, and they affect your life equally. You have a great teacher, they will take you places. If you have a terrible teacher, they will make you feel horrible. Yeah. And you're just going to throw a whole bunch of really bad teachers at a problem. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're going to have a whole bunch of negative outcomes with that.
Absolutely.
And so that's my fear, is as we look toward the future and you get these new teachers and you're using these same 1990s approach to teaching kids, it's not going to work.
No.
And so it's almost, not to birdwalk too much, but veterinary science. Yep. There's a huge bottleneck with veterinary science. So you have all these people who want to become vets, and 4 schools, 5 schools that teach vet science. And everybody in those schools has been teaching vet science for 30, 40 years. So they're done. A whole bunch of new people want in. Yeah. There's no one to teach them. I think we're going to get that way with education. Yeah. 30, 40-year-old vets are going to go, I'm done. I want to retire. And all the newbies aren't going to be able to get that. And we're going to have a revolution with how we teach kids. Yeah. Those new teachers are going to have to figure it out. And I think a lot of things we'll see before they figure it out. I think we'll see the end of the 5-day week. I think we're going to see more 4-day school weeks become popular, and then maybe a shift into a more of a mentality that kids can do virtual and work. Yeah. And enjoying in a career early, or just say, I'm working on this welding certification. Yeah. I'm going to work with this welding company here in Casper, and join the two when they graduate high school. They just go off and do it. I think those are the changes we'll see. Much more about corporate privatization of education.
Yeah, I think it has to become that.
Yeah.
Because of the information, right? You're getting information everywhere. These kids, actually, I was at a school about a couple months ago. I'm not going to say where I was at, but I said something, and I always say this, and actually I'm going to ask you a question after this, because and I didn't mean any disrespect by it, but educators always take this one the wrong way. I said, these kids, be honest with you, they don't need school. And here's what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. We have the internet.
Yeah.
You can learn how to do anything like that.
Yep.
It's quick, right?
Yep.
We can't deny that. Yep. That's there. I know what they said. Why do you think they got mad at me?
For the same reason that they'd get mad at me. I said there's 10% you can never reach. Because they want to say that, the title of this segment for you is No Child Left Behind. Yep. There's gonna be. It's not, public education isn't designed to
reach inevitable
every kid. It's just not. And you're not gonna, I just feel like you're not gonna reach every kid. That doesn't mean that every kid doesn't get a future. I'm not saying don't help every kid. Yeah. It's just not going to look the same for everyone. So I think when you say that, people instantly bristle, because they're saying, well, what, you're going to leave some behind? What do you mean? Yeah. And then you have to explain it. You have to dive in and say, well, why couldn't a kid look at Khan Academy? Why couldn't a kid look at these other avenues? And why as a system are we gatekeeping that? Yeah. One of the things that I think Western Governors University has really piloted and pioneered is this idea of comprehension-based exams. Why can't you be a gifted and talented kid, come in and say, I'm done with high school, give me this exam.
Absolutely.
Pass it and let them move on.
Let them move on.
We do all this weird gatekeeping and minutes in a seat, these models that are outdated, where you better sit for 180 minutes in an English class. Why? Yeah. If they can pass and show that they've mastered an idea, let them go. Yeah. And so that's what I think. Is that what you think they got mad about?
No, they told me. Oh. So I like that perspective though. And I think that makes a lot of sense. What I was told and I think it's more of a personal thing. So you have to be careful, right? We, as people, we can't take things so personal.
Oh, agreed.
They said, so you're telling me there's all these credentials and none in this room and we're not needed. Oh. And I said, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm saying that the times have changed. And it was fine, and there's only a few people, but it's one of those situations is like, we have to stop thinking everything's about us.
Yeah.
And we have to start saying, okay, what's good for, and I love what you said about why can't they just take the comprehension and just move on? I tell kids all the time, there's some kids I know, school's not their thing.
No.
Agreed. And I said, you're going to be successful in a lot of things.
Right.
Like you really are.
Yep.
And so just do what you have to do now to get to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And you brought up an interesting situation that happens all the time, especially right now in education. You get 6 or 7 people. I think about it all the time. We'll have some massive event, right? And then I'm in the room with 6 or 7 other people, and I start thinking salaries. And I think, look at how much money is in this room right now for this one event. And I used to get really pessimistic and go, oh, there's just what a waste of everyone's time. And now I start to think more creatively. Well, how did we all? There's no reason all of us need to be here for this. This is a small blip in the entire educational system. Why are we all here dealing with this? There needs it. So it's the reverse, right? Like, why are we all here? Why is all this money here when it should be somewhere else helping the larger system? Yeah. This should be a very small response and moving on. Yeah. But the bigger issues require more, experience and people who've been around, and people who've been around get paid more. And so I don't know, but that's another example of we, I guess the term I'd use is kowtow to everything. If there's something negative, we're going out of our way to fix it. Yeah. When really there's sometimes we just as a community need to say, that's not a priority.
That's not what we need to focus on.
Yeah. We're not here to fix that specifically. Right. And I think that's where some of our parents get upset when they come forward and say, don't teach grit, don't teach my kid emotional learning. They're like, my kid needs reading. Yeah, they do. But if we ignore the milk on the floor, this other issue, they're never going to get to reading. Yeah. They can't make friends and they have no friends. And so they're disconnected. And so they hop online and then they become radicalized. Yeah. And then they want to type about weird stuff the whole time. And then they get kicked out of school, all because you want them to read, but we just need them 10 minutes to clean up the milk. Yeah. Yeah.
So good. So good. One of the things I want to shed light more on this stuff in education because it just needs to be talked about. Do you think the system can ever be changed? The system of education.
I don't know. I think it's been very highly politicized. Yes. And I think until that goes away, it'll be difficult. Yeah. Because I went to St. Anthony's when I was K9. So I didn't go to high school till 10th grade. I believe now that you should have a waiver. We don't have waivers in Wyoming. I think it makes a lot of sense as a parent. If I don't want to go to public school, I should be able to get my tax money and go to a private school. Yep. But a lot of people would say, well, you're destroying public education. Or I want to fix this one component. Well, you're destroying public education. Well, then it's not that strong. Right. Like,
that's just it.
Yeah. You take one brick out and the whole thing falls. That's not okay.
Absolutely.
So I think until we get away from these little pieces of, very highly politicized things, we'll not be able to fix it.
Yeah, I agree.
It'll take either complete destruction of the whole thing or someone to come in and be able to back it all up with data to go, actually, if you do A, B, and C, you will revolutionize education.
And that's what needs to happen. Yeah. There needs to be something that can do that, right? There needs to be something that comes in and says this. So you change. The question that I ask is, I do think, and what I see sometimes is, because I've had many administrators come to me and say, I can't say this out loud, but you can, and so it's just that thing of we have to get to a place where the government gets out of this thing. Mm-hmm. Schools have to go back to local control. Mm-hmm. They have to, because they need to be able to make their own decisions. When they can do that, if that can happen, then public education can change. The system can change, because then a school can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. Maybe some kids are better at this, right? So let's put them in that. Maybe some kids are better at it. Let's put them in that. If they can do that, kids are going to be more enjoyable at school. And again, they're going to get the tools that they need. I'm afraid that we won't pay attention to what our kids need anymore, and public schools will start closing. In 20 years. Yep. The future of education will just be online. I think last year someone did a study on this, actually at one of the districts I was just at recently. She's an administrator. 2 million kids left education last year.
Yes. And then, so I've seen that. So the Associated Press put out a huge study that all these kids are gone, and they're not in homeschool. They're not, they didn't, and this sounds crass, but they didn't die in COVID.
Right.
They're just gone. And even Natrona County as a community has had that. We just have kids that are gone. Mm-hmm. And when you start to look at, well, where'd they go? What are they doing? No one knows. But the problem becomes when these kids disappear, so does the funding. And in Wyoming, we're very much based on a shared system of monies that are all kind of mineral royalties. And so what Gillette gets, Casper gets. What Casper gets, Cheyenne gets. Cheyenne, Sheridan. We all share the same kind of, everybody is very equal. Well, you start missing 100 kids here, 100 kids there, 100 kids there. Pretty soon you're up to 100,000 kids in Wyoming.
Oh yeah.
And that is a crazy number because our population is too low for that. But the point being that when you get all these kids missing, there goes the money too. And so then you have to reduce your force as far as hiring teachers. Yeah. And so typically you don't have new teachers when you do that. Yeah. You just have the tenured old ones. Yeah. We've already talked about tenured old ones aren't reaching the younger kids, but they're the only ones left. And so you don't have innovation, you don't have risk takers in there trying to figure things out. And so you have the same old 1990s approach with these kids, and there's no one coming in because you can't hire them because all the money's gone. And so that report was really interesting nationwide. Where'd the kids go? And with the kids, the money goes, and then your system becomes stagnant.
Yeah, and as we've gotten more in this digital age, there's more awareness on people just don't like public education. And so people are just being pulled out too.
Oh, agreed.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think we need to re-stigmatize this thing in a good way to say, public education is still good, but it's kind of a call to action to the system out there. Mm-hmm. Let's make some changes. Yeah. Let's get to a place where we can actually meet the needs of our kids in every single way. And I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. And what you're talking about is innovation, right?
That's it.
And it's just thinking outside the box. Yep. When you have that family that pulls a kid, it shouldn't mean that it's done with public education. Yeah. Why can't we get creative?
Absolutely.
You have mom and dad teach English at home because they're really good at it, and maybe they teach that emotional learning, and then they come and get math and science. And then you develop a hybrid system, but that won't work right now. It cannot work right now. Yeah. Because of the money follows the kids. If a kid's not enrolled full-time, taking 8 classes that have been predetermined by the state under the current testing that you have to report to the feds, then you can't change.
This is good.
Yeah, you have to get that money to keep everybody employed.
I love shedding light. And, last couple of years I've met more administrators, so it's really good to just hear your perspective.
Yeah, we're super optimistic about it.
Yeah. Very optimistic. And it's great. I have a lot of opinions on this, and I'll have to bring you back for another episode because, there's definitely there's a lot of moving parts to this, but I do think there is still hope. Mm-hmm. I do think there is still hope for education to change, but it has to change sooner than later.
Agreed.
And once we get to that place, I think we're going to be able to have the conversation. We got to be able to have the conversation. Once we can have the conversation of what needs to be done, then we can start saying, all right, how do we make it happen?
Yes.
And so very excited about some potentials. I mean, you've been talking about a lot of things too. So super excited about some potentials, just to be able to be an ear and to hear your heart on this thing. But I'll definitely bring you back. I have something I do on every episode.
Okay. And I have not watched your episodes in entirety, so I'm excited.
So I have a question that I'm going to ask you. Your 13-year-old self, you look back to younger Christopher. Yeah. You're looking at him face to face. Okay. What do you say to him?
What would I say? So 13-year-old me would have been at St. Anthony's. I had 4 kids in my class. That was it all day long.
Did you graduate top of your class?
No. I'm the worst student. And anybody who hangs out with me, it's my personality. Like I get so bored with things that I am self-destructive. Yeah. Gosh, that's a really good question. What would I say? I would probably say something about finding time to have a hobby that I'm good at. Like try and, so we all have to work. We all have a path in life. It's very linear. We're all on the same road. If I could go back, I would tell my younger self to find something I love and really dedicate myself to it. Like anything. I love piano. Love it. Awesome. I cannot play it. And I've even tried to download piano like teaching apps.
Sure.
And if I could go, it would be something like that. Like, hey, go dive into this, because there's times in my life where I struggle with distractions from the chaos. And again, so much of what I do is responding to crises and helping people who are sad and angry. And I don't get a lot of happy moments. It would be cool to find hobbies that were a distraction and that I could be good at, that would help me also perpetuate my career, in that I could use that. And the piano, I just think that would be so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I would do. If I could go back,
And then you tell them not to go into criminal justice.
I would. Yeah, because again, I made that decision. Really, it actually happened after. So I was in as senior in high school, and I absolutely was frustrated in one of my English, or maybe I was a junior in my English class. And I said, I never want to be in education. I'm I don't like being treated like this, and I don't like it. And that's when I was like, well, I'd be an officer. Like, I would uphold justice. And that's kind of what made me go in to the first part of it, was like, oh, I like righteousness of things. I like fairness and equity, and I'm going to help with that. And now I get to do that still with like what I'm in right now. That is what I do. I get to work with principals and say, hey, treat this kid just like this other kid, because they're fair, and you've got to be equitable, and don't, just because you find them obnoxious, take a minute and look at that. They're not just this black and white different kid. There's a gray area, and what they brought to the table, you've got to consider, whether it's trauma, whether it's they've never had trauma in their life. And that's nice. So that's nice. So I get to live that a little bit now. Yeah.
We have to learn to understand the gray more.
I love it. Yep.
Christopher, it's been an honor, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. I have to bring you on again.
Anytime.
And to all my listeners, you're going to be okay. I'm with you. There's so much gold inside of you that you're going to be able to walk the greatness outside of you. Continue to live whole and a full life. And I promise you, you will have a life that you can be proud of. I love y'all, and I'll see you next time.